folks, the Alberti Show, and coming to you from beautiful downtown Pahrump, Nevada. This is a wonderful day for a show. The weather here has been spectacular today. It was kind of like being here in the fall. So let's start off the show today. I want to tell you something I'm going to talk about today is water, not as you've seen it, but as I see it. And hopefully we can agree on what we see. But before I get to that, I want to make an announcement about the Pahrump Valley Lions Club. They are going to be producing a love letters skit, and it is going to be at the Sanders Winery on Kellogg Road here in Pahrump. If anyone is interested in attending there, you can contact Bill Newyear. His phone number is 661-406-5502. And I'll give that to you again. It's 661-406-5502. And just so you know, Bill Newyear will be one of the two stars in the show, and the other one will be Linda DeMeo, wife of our previous sheriff, Tony DeMeo. There you go. So I would like to talk a little about water here. And you and I, well, before I even get to that, let me get to this other thing. I want to talk about value for a minute. What truly does value mean to you? Does it mean the assets that you have and what their value is, like your home or your car, how much money you have in the bank, how rich you are, the wonderful things you have in life? To me, all those things have some sort of value, but the values of things change over time. That brand new car you got 5 years ago doesn't have the same value anymore. Even though you can still get in it and it still runs and it still drives, it doesn't have the same value. That house you bought 20 years ago, today is probably worth more than when you bought it. So it's obvious, if you examine things, that value can change. And I have always looked, there was a course I took with my wife and I back in the mid-'80s. And it was a 5-day course, which ran from 8 in the morning until 10 at night, sometimes 11. And it was the type of education that you don't normally get in school. It was put on by a company called the Lexington Royce Institute. It was a real estate guy who gathered up a bunch of people who do unique things in real estate. And boy, let me tell you, you know how you sit in class sometime and your time to doze off or your mind wanders? Not in that class. And one of the subjects that they had some really interesting guys, but one of the people who came there to talk to us was a lawyer named Jay Schwab. And I still have his book. And at that time, when I was mentioning earlier now in the show, we would always look at the possessions we had and their value. And so do all our friends. But as I've gotten on in the years and I've gained more maturity in my thinking, I realize value is not what I thought it was. You know, people will tell you that good health is your value. Well, it could be. But the real value I see is this. I used to volunteer for every issue that came up. I was a volunteer on a political party. I was a volunteer on a school board. Never accepted money for anything I ever did. always wanted to do the good things that helped have a better society. And in my youth, it didn't matter how much time I put to it because life, to me at that time, the value of life had a long history ahead of me. But now I look at things a little different. Now I'm at the age of 81. I don't look at value the same. When I decide that I'm going to volunteer for something, with the limited number of years I anticipate that I have left, unless science comes along to let me live for 1,000 years like Methuselah and those guys, every day is more valuable. It has a higher value to me personally. Excuse me. So if somebody comes to me and asks me to give them some help or to do something, my first thought is, how does that impact what I do today? What is the value of life to me today? Every day I live a day longer had more value as I got older than when I was younger. And I look at that today. And what I learned from Jay Schwab was this, and I hope it has some effect on you as well. All the things that we own today cannot be taken with you when you go to the other side. While you are here, the best you can do is have the right to use those things because you ain't taking them with you. So when Jay kind of covered that, he was really talking about having a trust and other ways of having ownership of material things, but you didn't have to worry about it because you didn't own it, but you were giving yourself the right to use the things you no longer owned. And that's kind of what happened with a trust. With a trust, you take all those assets, all those things of monetary value, and you put them into a kind of like a box. And you own the box, but you don't own the contents. The contents become owned by the box. And if that sounds weird, you can look at the box as if it's what we would call the trust. And there's several kinds of trust. Now, once those things are in that box, you own the box. So anything in the box you can use as you see fit. You can buy and sell stuff. You can save it. You can use it. You can loan it to a friend, whatever. But you own it. And the truth of the matter is, the day comes when you go to meet your maker. You can't take it with you. And there is one other thing you can't take with you, I don't think, and I don't know. Can you take the memories that you've generated over your entire life, all the good things, all the bad things? Can you do more of what you wanted to do that didn't finish? I don't know. Nobody knows. Do you cease to exist? We don't know. I find it hard to imagine we don't cease to exist. And I personally plan to live forever. And at the age of 81, so far so good. I'm looking at a long time down the road here. But I just thought I would talk about the value of your life as you get older. Why spend your life every day just waiting for the end to come? Why not do something productive? Something that makes you feel good that you accomplished it. And I don't care what it is. How about sitting down and putting down on paper, like a manuscript, of your life? I go to the senior center here in the town of Pahrump, and I get an opportunity to visit with a lot of older folks. And in my life cycle, I meet a lot of older folks anyway. Matter of fact, every once in a while, I'm not used to it, but every once in a while, sometimes a woman will open the door for me as I'm going into the supermarket. Well, that's kind of another story, I guess. But anyway, that's kind of the way I look at it. So when you're examining your life, why don't you make a list of the things you've done that you feel you'd like future generations to know about? And it doesn't matter that they can't see you anymore. But if you put it in a booklet form of some type, or you do some videos about your life and talk about it, you could do that. It's a lot easier. And just imagine if you, now that you're an older person, could see your grandfather or grandmother or their parent or the parent before. Just think if you could see that and know their stories. And I can tell you, there's going to be stuff there that they may have told you, didn't tell you about, but if they wrote it, you'd know. And I'm talking because I heard stories from my mother, my father, and my grandmother. And when you hear stories from them, this is the truth. And they did these things. So I guess I kind of beat that around the bush here, but I can't say enough about writing some of your own history. Matter of fact, that's why I moved to Pahrump. We originally were going to move to Utah. And I was going to write my book, so to speak, as it was. And I actually have about 70 different topics I was going to put in that book. I led a kind of interesting child life, to say the least. And it carried me through my whole life. And so I've written 2 chapters. And I've only been here 19 years. I'll get to it. Don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. That's what they say. All right, so let's get on with the show here. I want to talk a little about water. Now, in case you're at my YouTube page, I have a picture behind me that is a picture of Peckstein Ranch. And I think if you live in Pahrump, you should take a drive over to Peckstein Ranch. And there's a road named after them. It's up around Irene. And you should go over there and look. Because the picture I have behind me, when I first moved here, the real estate broker that I worked out of her office had a listing at Peckstein Ranch, the whole ranch. And so I went out to take pictures. And the picture behind me shows like a lake. And that lake really was pumped from the ground onto the land for a very good logical and legal reason. There's a rule in Nevada called the use it or use it law, use it or lose it, which means that you have to use the water that you have water rights for over a period of 5 years, or you could lose your water rights. Now, I don't know many people that would have lost them. But an example of use it or lose it, that water that you'd have to put some hip boots on to walk in this stuff behind me. It was used to irrigate the field to grow alfalfa or just to get the water use, you know. And I've looked at that, and it always bothered me that here we are in the desert, and that's a very inefficient use of water. As a matter of fact, Nevada's use it or lose it law is really negative, not beneficial to the citizens of Nevada, because people with water rights feel they have to use the water, or they lose what they bought. They want paper. Water rights are paper. And for those of you who don't know, when you buy a house on an acre, you have the right to use water from that acre that you're on, from the ground. But when you're going commercial, you have to buy water rights. That's paper that gives you the right to use a certain amount of water. So I've always been concerned that how much water do we have? I mean, when I moved here, I was told by more than one person that we had the 3rd largest aquifer in the country. Imagine that, the 3rd largest aquifer in the country. And so I thought, wow, look at the potential for this place. So we bought a lot and we built a house. And after I built the house and I went back to work, I was always curious about that, because if I had customers and I would tell them that, they would ask me, well, how much water is that? And I didn't know. So I started asking around of other people, and somebody recommended to me, who was not in government, by the way, this was a private citizen, that I should go talk to a guy named Tom Bucco. And I asked him why. He said, well, Tom is the county hydrologist. We paid him $500,000 up to this point to study the hydrology and tell us about water here. He can set you straight and he can tell you how much water we think is there. So I went to see Tom. I found him. And he had an office on Calvada, down near the Calvada Eye, just off the circle. And when I went in to talk to him about this, he asked me, he said, where did you hear this? I explained to him, I heard it at the Chamber of Commerce, my real estate broker that I had used to buy my lot, told me that. The town board had it in their magazine. It was on real estate websites. I said, are you telling me this is not true, Tom, or do you know how much water we have? And he said, Andy, we're not the third largest aquifer in the world. Okay, so I had to keep my pants up because I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of him as if I didn't already know that. And then he said, we're not even the third largest aquifer in the state. I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. Everybody's telling me we are. And then he said, we're a large aquifer, but none of what you believe is true. So that's one of the reasons I have this picture behind me, because when you see all this water, you wonder, what the hell is he talking about? Well, it turns out we are not the third largest aquifer in the state. As a matter of fact, we have a water basin behind us that recharges, on average, 20,000 acre feet a year. That water comes from someplace else that we hope always gets a snow and enough rain to recharge our aquifer. And Tom said, but even though we recharge our aquifer at 20,000 acre feet a year, my studies show we're using 22,000 acre feet a year. And so I looked at Tom and I said, well, Tom, does that mean that we're going to lose our aquifer? What are we going to do? And then Tom passed away. And his wife, I guess, has all of his documentation. But it gave me concern. So I have a couple of other things I want to mention before I go to another topic. The picture that's behind me now on my recording is going to change halfway through the show. And I'll tell you what that is about when we get there. So, and I brought this whole issue up again today because in the Las Vegas Sun, on a Wednesday of last week, they had an article written by Llewellyn King, and his article was, "The Great Western Drought, Will It Affect Us All?" And maybe you don't think you've got any issue here because you got city water. It comes in on a line from the local water district. But where do you guys think they're getting their water from? Take a guess. There are different wells around town that they get water, process it in their plant, and send it out to you underground. So they tell you they're sending out good, clean water, but they're not testing it in your house. So you really don't know what you got. And I can't tell you what you got, and I'm not interested in it. I have a well, so I've had my water tested, and I know what I'm getting. All right, so here's what Llewellyn King wrote. He says, scientists have classified this monstrous drought that we're having as a mega drought. There hasn't been regular rain or mountain snow in the West for more than 20 years. To call it a scorcher is to underestimate a catastrophe that has the possibility of reaching near biblical proportions. This is big, and there is no quick fix. None. The drought means epic disruptions, merciless rearrangement. So let me go through what he talks about here. He says, first, of course, there is no water. which means much economic activity may slow or cease. Farmers won't be able to grow crops or raise livestock. Food prices that are already high from the pandemic's disruptions will go even higher. And just so you know, Arizona in the past did have an aquifer go dry. So don't think it couldn't happen. But I will say that uh, our technicians and our engineers and our scientists are always looking for ways to improve how we get water, where it comes from, and so forth. But this article that he wrote is based on a presumption of nothing changing. Goes on to say the electricity supply will be strained and may be curtailed because of reduced hydroelectric production. The 13 western states get more than 22% of their electricity from hydropower dams located mostly in Washington, according to the National Hydropower Association. And just for your current information, Valley Electric gets 20% of its electricity from Hoover Dam. And because the water in Hoover Dam is going down, it's getting lower, they are producing 10% less power out of those hydroelectric generators than they used to. In today's world, farmers depend on electricity to water crops and livestock, milk cows, dry grain, and freeze produce. And what do you think is going on in California these days? You don't hear much about it because nobody wants to talk about it, but you can find information if you look for it. There are rural communities in California that have had to have water trucked into their house because their aquifer went dry. Now, one of our relatives lived in Paso Robles in California, and they brought in all these vineyards, and the water levels started to drop to the point where they had to institute emergency measures to make sure it didn't drop anymore. And then they started fixing things, and I don't know where they are today, but at least they still have some water. But our relatives moved away. They moved here because we had the third largest aquifer. Ha ha ha. So the first measurable disruption of the summer will be from breakdowns in the California food supply chain. Prices in supermarkets will reflect the impact of the drought on California, which acts as the nation's truck farm. If you eat it, it grows in California, but only when there is water for irrigation. And you know, there have been some reports, physical video reports of interviews with farmers in California who are having to deepen their wells. And what they're doing is as the water levels go down, they're chasing the water. But somebody's got to ask the question, what do they do when they get to the bottom? And don't think there's no bottom. There always is. The rivers of the West are running dry. The rivers of water in the great dams on the major rivers, especially the Columbia and the Colorado, which act as the lifelines of much of the West, are way below normal. Manufactured goods from Western states will be affected if power shortages are extended and widespread. Wildfires will abound and have already started their annual scourge. You know, the drier the trees and the desert gets, the easier it is for things to ignite. And we're already seeing some of that. So in quality of life, electricity shortages might just become particularly brutal if you lived in areas served by the grid in the West. And I've talked on this show before about the fact that the grid is no longer as strong and stable as it used to be. And it's not going to happen overnight that they fix that. Meanwhile, you should all be buying electric cars and all the other electric goodies, and don't worry about solar power because government will provide. Not. So the historical move of Americans from the Northeast to the South and the Southwest is going to become in question, if not reversed. If you can't get enough water here, you're going to wind up going back to the colder climates where they have snowpack and they have water there. And droughts aren't ended because it rains. It takes years of sustained precipitation, ideally falling gently to restore that which the heat has taken away. Now, there are those who keep track of these things, and the West isn't the only part of the country suffering drought. Many states are reporting reduced rainfall, including traditional soggy regions of New England. I want to offer a suggestion here about this. You know, one of the ways of determining climate conditions in the past is to go where there's an aging tree, an old tree. If you can find a tree that's 400 years old and you chop it down, you can look at the tree rings and look at the width of each ring, because with a tree, the rings on a tree inside, the original ring is on the inside, and every year as the tree cycles from warm to cold to warm, a new ring is developed on the perimeter, the outer side. So as you look at those rings from the center going out, you can see what the weather was like. And as I mentioned before, if you go to the Pahrump Museum here in town, which is on Basin Avenue, just a bit west of building Highway 160 on Basin, you'll see an old tree. It's 400 years old. And you can actually see the tree rings in there. And then you can decide for yourself just how much truth is in what I have to say. I know I've looked at it. Kind of, if you believe in the tree ring theory, and obviously that's the science. Dr. Fauci loves science. The science of the tree ring factory. It's right there, black and white. Can't miss it. And they have some little stickers on it so you can see different parts of the tree at the age, so you can kind of get an idea about what they're looking at. So I've mentioned all these things, and I have another part of this water thing that during my break, I'm going to change over. And then I'll tell you that very short story about that, and we'll go on to the rest of it. But for people who have just moved here, if you don't know these things about Pahrump and southern Nye County, you should. You should have known them before you moved here. Because every new person that moves here uses more of this water that we're already using too much. As a matter of fact, I know certain parts of town have more difficulty with water levels than other parts. So you should always ask the well driller their opinion of the water levels where you plan to purchase. It's a good thing to know. As a matter of fact, when you drive around town and you see all these dead mesquites, the mesquite trees that are dead on the vacant lots, they didn't die because the water level came up. At one time, those were green and growing. But as the water level dropped, they could only chase that water so far. And those plants are the same as us. If we have to chase that water too far, who knows? Maybe they'll come out. There are people that are, I don't want to be a downer, because there are people looking at taking water out of the air. Even in a climate in the desert like Death Valley, they can still pull 2 or 3 quarts of water out of the air a day, or liters, as they say. So it's not necessarily end. And they could do things on the coast like desalinization plants and what have you, so that they use water there that we would normally have to ship to them from inland. So there are things that could be done. And that article in the Las Vegas Sun that I just kind of read over some of it to you, that's based on what we know today. But you know, things can change it. One new invention, one new technology, and before you know it, we're off and running again. So I have to take a short break here to feed my parched throat. And when I come back, Mr. Producer, give me about a minute or two and I'll be back.
ready?
Ready. Okay, I'm back. And there's a new picture behind me now. And because I've been talking about water, I wanted to show you something of history that you do not know for sure. You were not alive at that. Well, there may be some people still alive at that time, but they probably didn't live here. The picture behind me is one of Hoover Dam. Now, originally, I saw this picture at the Fry's Electronics store in Las Vegas. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, I got to take a picture of that because that won't be around that long. So that's what's behind me. And if you see pictures of the water behind Hoover Dam today, this picture is identical to what you'll see today, and it was taken in 1950 when the population of Las Vegas was 30,000 people. There's a great big old white bathtub ring around the land behind Hoover Dam. So I don't know what caused that, but with a population of 30,000 and seeing that, and now knowing the population in Las Vegas area is 2 million, I'm not surprised the water level's going down. And there's a question we should all be asking the people who run water out of Las Vegas, all the government entities. How much water is in the dam? Now, when they tell you about the water level in the dam, they tell you the level of water above sea level. So they'll say the level of water at the Hoover Dam is 1,050 feet. You think, oh, geez, we don't have a thing to worry about. Why are they telling us that we're going to have a water shortage of some kind? Well, let me tell you, 1,050 feet above sea level is not the depth of the water at Hoover Dam. What I would like to know is how much water, how deep is the water in Hoover Dam when I can see the bottom coming? So that's what that picture is behind me. And that was 1950. You know, I'm a fan of history. You look at things historically and you see what people do today. People say dogs live for the moment. So do people. What happens to a person today, if it's bad, oh, they feel terrible. But in 2 days, they don't feel so bad about it anymore. And a year later, it's a memory. If it was something good, same thing. They might feel a little better about talking the good thing, but so this thing about the history of the dam, a lot of water comes to Las Vegas out of the dam. Now, there are other states above the dam before we get water that have to control the flow of their water so they have enough. What do you think would happen if we needed more water, and so did they, and they said to Nye County or Nevada, I'm sorry, we can't send it to you right now because we'll run dry. Now, if you go back historically just a few years back, in Salt Lake City, Utah, they had a reservoir there and the main broke coming out of the reservoir. That thing almost entirely emptied out. Who'd have thunk it? It was close to being a real calamity. But they managed to do some things and get it fixed, and the reservoir started filling back up again. But that could happen. So I think that if you want to have water in the future, we got to think about this today. And, you know, Nye County created this water district. And one of the commissioner's wives, Lorinda Wickman, was the wife, and her husband became head of the water district at a salary of $40,000 a year. I think that's what it was. I may be off a little bit. And they passed a law in Nye County that they needed to fund this water district. So they decided that the law would read for every parcel, you had to pay $5 in taxes a year towards the operation of the water district, whatever they would use the money for. Now, at first, that sounds like it's pretty fair. But you know, wealth brings more wealth. And I think it should have been $5 per acre. Because what happened was, if you have a postage stamp lot, 8,000 square foot lot, that's a quarter of an acre, you were paying $5. If you owned 100 acres, like one of our past assemblymen and others, if you own the dairy out in Amargosa, if you own a mine that's got 100 acres or whatever, that was $5. One parcel was $5. So if you have a 100-acre parcel, it was $5. So to me, that's different than when you owned housing. Housing was based on the value of the house, and the assessor would come up with a value. But here they set a value. And they told us, well, it's just $5. You won't really miss it. It'll be no big deal. Now, we all know that when government tells you it's just $1 or it's just $5 and that's all we're going to charge, that's what it'll be. They would never raise that tax again. Except the water district came back and said, now we want to charge $30 a year to every parcel. This is the last free American town. We don't take that crap. We don't like government constantly taking the money from us that we've worked so hard to earn. Every dollar that somebody earned in this county is a piece of their life that dollar represents. It didn't just show up on their doorstep one day. It meant something. And every time government takes it away, your opportunity to use that money for your personal benefit is reduced. So every time you hear that, and let's take another example. When everybody wanted you to quit smoking, they came up with a higher cigarette tax. And they used that tax to create a, what do you call it, when students get a grant to go to school or whatever. So there was money coming in from the sales tax of these cigarettes, and so that money was applied towards these scholarships. Well, you know, when people had to spend more money for cigarettes and they kept hearing these negative things about smoking and all, they stopped smoking. Well, what happened to the sales tax money? They didn't get a lot what they used to get. And they told us it was only because of the sales tax on cigarettes that we would have this scholarship fund. Well, when the money started running out, your good people in government said, you know what? What we said before, we don't give a crap. Now we want to allocate money to that scholarship fund, no matter what money comes in from cigarette sales tax. You know, folks, whenever you see a law passed, to get it passed, they tell you it has a sunshine date. Elected officials don't care that it has a sunshine date. I don't care who the elected official is. It depends on whose ox is going to be gored by that tax increase. Brian Sandoval, when he was governor, $1 billion tax increase for the state. And he was a Republican governor, supposed to be fiscally conservative. Money is money, and those dollars that you see are time out of your life to have those dollars. And government is saying to you, give us that piece of your life so we maybe can give some of it to somebody else to make them feel good. And you know that's happening. You may not phrase it the way I have, but I'm telling you, when the government comes along and takes your tax money and wants to give it to somebody else who sits home and just gets fat on their ass, and they know the government will take care of them because they want them to vote for them, it's true. I don't want to say negative things about somebody who's got an illness or has an infirmity that they can't do the things they would normally do. People went to war, they had arms and legs or other issues with them. Even civilians have had things that have happened to them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that it's the value of your life as determined by your dollar amount. That's how you relate it. Now, there was one gentleman who lives here in Pahrump, wrote in the Pahrump Valley Times recently that he was a millionaire and he worked his ass off to get it and he worked very hard and he was diligent and he made good decisions. And I respect that. I didn't do that. I didn't care to do it. It might have been fun, but I have my own philosophy about doing these things. But now his $1 million as a million, and I won't tell you who it was because it's not fair, but his money is a reflection of his years in business, in his life. So maybe every hour of his life might have been worth $100 an hour, where someone else's value in their life might have been worth $10 an hour, depending on the kind of work they did. And I don't mean any type of work. Every work has value. But when it comes down to the issue of your lifestyle and water, the fact that government, this water district wanted to charge you $30 a parcel, it got beat back, by the way. Didn't happen. This is the last free American town. And we don't like government messing with us. In Nye County and in Pahrump, Nevada, we didn't like government messing with our money so much that we voted to dissolve the elected town board. And if you think that's not the case on my YouTube channel, The Last Free American Town is the name of that YouTube channel, by the way. You'll see a short video of what took place at that town board meeting when they threatened to do a citizen's arrest of the entire town board right here in Pahrump, Nevada. And that town board got voted out and they don't exist anymore. It was a level of government we felt for a long time we didn't need and still don't. And you'll see people come here and think they moved into a city. They moved into a free town. It's run by the county commissioners. And we're not the only one in Nye County. Decisions that are made by the county commissioners operating as the town board. You should go to a commissioner meeting once in a while. I'm sure you'll be thrilled at what you see. Okay, so put some value in your life as you get older. Protect your assets. You can't take them with you, but it'd be nice to leave them for somebody. I know when my dad was alive, I urged him, when you're in real estate, you see all kinds of things happen with families over money when one of them passes away. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, I don't want you to leave anything. Everything you earned, you should spend in your final days to have the best life you can have as you get old. I don't want you to leave anything. But my dad came through the Depression, and he just couldn't do that. So he left assets. And I'm sorry he did. Because of those assets, I lost my faith in my sister and haven't spoken to her since. Someday I may tell you that story. It's interesting. I'm one of those people who looks at the details, and the details on that were kind of interesting. Okay, so last item on this water issue. When I started the Night Gold Seekers here in Pahrump, and the original meeting was like 12 people in my garage, 6 of which were my relatives and their kids. And the other 6 were people I knew who said, okay, I'll come to your meeting so you can get started. And the second meeting was a different 8 people, and a couple of them that had been there prior to that. And then I had a third meeting, and I'm telling you this just how it went. And we decided that we would have a guest speaker to talk about snakes. And because we have snakes here in Pahrump, and some of them can be kind of nasty. So can some of the spiders. So anyway, so we scheduled this out, and we had scheduled a small building right next to the pool here in Pahrump. And we expected maybe we'd get 25, 30 people show up to hear the speaker. And it was overwhelming. We had 85 people show up, and that's what really kicked off the Gold Seekers. So over a period of 2 years, we wound up with over 120 families in it. We had a claim of 160 acres in Johnny, just 25 miles north of town. And we actually had received a donation of $10,000, equivalent of a truck-mounted rock crusher and what's known as a gold wave table. You'll see them if you watch Gold Rush on TV. So that was pretty good. We got that after 5 months. We were off to a good start. All right, so the reason I'm telling you about this, it was their article in the Pahrump Valley Times recently about the Department of Wildlife flying water to bighorn sheep. Now that means that they're taking water to the sheep, who are wild animals, are not stupid. People can be stupid, but not animals. Animals react. And they're flying water to them. So when we were in the Gold Seekers, we would go out. I went out with Monty Duard and a fellow named Mike Norton. I used to call him Mikey. And they would go out, and then I'd go out with them in their pickup truck, and we would look around in the mountains at different things to explore. And we ran across a couple of sites where they have some artesian wells high up in the mountain. And these wells would feed a container. One of them was a 500-gallon water tank to fill it with water so the animals could get water there. Even though there was water at the spring, they had to do this. Well, the result of the Forest Service putting these things in was that they didn't maintain them. They spent the money, they put them in, and then they didn't maintain them. And the water line running from one of the artesian wells, or I shouldn't call it a well because it's just water coming up to the ground, that ran down to the tank, had so many breaks in it that there was no water flowing into the tank anywhere. There was another one that was meant to collect rain. Well, that's a joke. Since when do you collect rain in the desert? I mean, the rainfall right here in Pahrump averages 4.5 inches of rain a year. And it hadn't rained so long here, we don't even know what that number is going to hold. So when we talk about water, those animals know where to go get the water. And if there's no water there, they will look around and find it. And there's something about, you can smell water. Animals have a much better sense of smell than we have. But even if it's going to rain, when the rain is coming, you can smell it coming. When you live in the desert. When you live in the city, your nose is so plugged up you won't know. But here in the desert, you'll know. So all this conversation about money and water and everything else, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And if you can't get water and somebody else has it, there's going to be some kind of a fight. And I hate to see that come. So we got to prepare ourselves. We have to be ready to be fair about what we do. Now, I want to go on to something else. There was an article in the local newspaper, a public notice about a vacancy, coincidentally, on the Nye County Water District Governing Board. How interesting could that be? How lucky can I be that this appeared in the newspaper and I'm doing a show about water? Yeah. So the Nye County Board of County Commissioners is requesting applications from persons interested in filling a vacancy on the Nye County Water District Governing Board. One vacancy is for a resident from the area in Nye County known as Current Creek, Smoky Valley Area Number 1. Why the hell would they put that in the Pahrump Valley Times? That's nowhere near down here. Should have gone in the Tonopah Times, I think. Anyway. Then there's a vacancy in Beatty, Amargosa Valley. Well, maybe there it would apply. And that term ends June 30th, 2023. The applicant or any person related to the applicant within the third degree of consanguinity. Do you know what consanguinity means? No, you don't. I do, but you don't because you probably never heard the word before. And if you did, you probably can't get a job in Nye County. So you can't be affiliated with the private utility regulated by the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. The duties and responsibilities expected of board members can be reviewed in the governing board bylaws document found in the helpful links governing board section of the Water District website at NyeCountyWaterDistrict.net. So that's the website, Nye County Water District, all one word, by the way, .net. Now, they'd like you to submit a letter of interest and a resume. So what does it take to have the qualifications to deal with water? Let me tell you something. That's BS. Bull crap, to say the least. Because I actually submitted an application to what's known as the NSSAB. I was a fluid power specialist. I had the job most engineers have. I was a fluid power specialist. That deals with fluids, how they move, how they react, all of that. And I made application. And I worked in the fluid power industry, in addition to other things. And guess who got that job? Who got to be on that board? Dina Erdag. She knows nothing about water except how to do the dishes with it or how to water the lawn. How did she get picked over somebody with my qualifications? I can't imagine. But if you answer this requirement to be on the board, maybe you better tell them who you're politically connected with, and that might help you better than what your qualifications are. I mean, this is Nye County. I've seen how Nye County operates. So before we get to the end of the show, I want to tell you what I want to talk about next week. We're coming up to the July 4th weekend, so I'm not going to talk about July 4th. There have been enough other people doing that. What I will say is you go to the fireworks display, that is worth going to. You are really going to enjoy it. And they always put on a great show here in Pahrump. We used to have people coming out here from Vegas to see our fireworks display. That's not what I want to talk about next week. I want to explore some things next week having to do with Nye County and the way in our history, and I want to relate it all to the location of our government's, the seat of government in this county. Nye County is the third largest county in the country. The largest county is San Bernardino County in California. The next largest is Cochise County in Arizona, and then it's Nye County. So I want to explore what those two counties do and how their government is set up, what their government does. Because I always believe instead of us reinventing the wheel, why don't we look at what other governments do and function accordingly? Well, what a concept. Now, I'd be glad to hire out to the county as and do a study for them for the tune of $100,000 to advise them on what to do. But you know what? If they don't want to move the county seat, then they don't want to spend the money for the study. And I can tell you, folks, they would sooner you don't know what goes on in Tonopah. They don't want. Anyway, I'm going to talk about that next week. That's going to be almost a whole show about the history of Nye County, the county seats, who did what. And if you want to buy a book called The Nye County Brothel Wars. You should buy that book. Now, you can't, they're out of print. They've been out of print for a long time. And I was told when I moved here that I should read the book. But I couldn't find the book. There's nowhere here. And even the library had a copy of the book and somebody took it home and never brought it back. I don't know why they didn't know who had it. They should have, because when you bring it back, I mean, you got to pay a fine if you haven't brought it back. But I found out, I went on Amazon a couple of years ago to look for it, and lo and behold, they had some used copies of Nye County Brothel Wars in paperback, and they were like $3. The shipping was as much as the book. And you should read it. I don't know if everything is 100% true, but I do know some people who lived here during that time. And there is a lot of it in there that is true. And there was a sheriff at that time named Joni, I want to say Mines. I think that was it, Joni. Anyway, I think it was Joni Mines, but that's close. And she was the first woman sheriff in Nye County. And I'll tell you a little about her story too. So when next week comes along, please tune in, or anytime during the week at 5 o'clock if you didn't miss the show on the live day, and you can hear it. You can also go to the station's Facebook page, 98.1 FM in Pahrump, and the show will be there. You can look at my YouTube channel, and we'll have a copy of the show there. So we have plenty of opportunity for you folks out there who are just moving here, or may have even lived here for quite some time, to learn a little more about the town you moved to. And it's an interesting place. I mean, since I've lived here, you know, if you live in a big city like Los Angeles and you want to do something, there's a big maze to go through. But when you move to a town like Pahrump and you want to do something, nobody says you can't do it. You can. So I want to leave you with that thought. Don't ever say you can't do something. Don't ever tell somebody else they can't. Encourage them, encourage yourself, and before you know it, if you keep at it, what you want will happen. Hopefully for the best. So I'm Andy Alberti. This has been on 98.1 FM, and I have enjoyed doing the show today, as I always do. And now I'm going to take leave of the show, and I am out of here.